The government has reached a deal to bring home hundreds of South Korean workers who were detained by U.S. authorities in a raid at Hyundai's Georgia plant. With more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Monday, September 8th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. A raid by U.S. authorities at a Hyundai manufacturing plant in Georgia last week is raising quite a bit of concern here in the country. For more on this, I have Fabian Kretschmer with German news agency DPA here in the studio. Fabian, welcome back.
Thanks for the invitation.
I also have Professor Ban Kil Joo at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy joining our talk virtually. Professor Ban, it's a pleasure.
Hello, good to be with you.
Right. Now, before we delve into the ripple effects of this particular raid, Fabian, let's begin with the details about how the immigration raid at Hyundai's Georgia plant unfolded.
Yeah, now we know that actually this raid has been in preparation for several months. And it was quite a dramatic scene. Maybe just to give you some context, the plant is in a very suburban, almost rural setting in Georgia. It is under construction. And actually, when the raid started, first what the state troopers did, they made a safety zone, so they blocked all the roads leading to the plant. And then they entered the compound, the premises, and started to line all the workers that they found against the wall and started investigating them. But of course, the other workers who got notice of the raid, they tried to flee. Others were hiding in ventilation shafts. We know that one worker who was later interviewed by CNN, he described the scene as like in a war zone. So there was a lot of panic. Actually, some workers tried to flee through a sewage pond. So that was on the premise of this factory, like a small lake, so to speak, and they tried to swim over it. And then, the ICE agents got on a boat and tried to fish them out of the water. And the ICE agents, they are armed. They carried weapons. They have masks to obstruct their face. So it was a scary sight, I presume. And what they did is they investigated all the workers, tried to ask for their social security number, for their birth and passport, etc. And when they found out, okay, some are legally there, then they could leave. But most of them, they at least that's what they said, were illegally working there. So they then basically detained them, and this went on for hours. So I think the raid was done by 8 p.m. So it took the whole day. Right, because they raided the place starting in the morning, I believe. Professor Ban, for the sake of context then, could you tell us a bit about this Hyundai manufacturing facility in Georgia and its significance?
Well, Hyundai's Georgia plant is not only huge in size, but also important for the cohesive economic relations between South Korea and the United States. First of all, this plant is known as the largest manufacturing project in history. This plant began its construction in January 2023 and was opened recently in March 2025. This plant has become Hyundai Motor Group's second plant in Georgia following the Kia Georgia plant. Second, this plant serves as a symbol for a cohesive relationship between South Korea and the United States, both economically and diplomatically, in a situation where the Trump administration seeks the revival of America's manufacturing infrastructure under the mega objectives. If this Hyundai Georgia plant is fully operational, Hyundai Motor Group mega plant America will be armed with the capacity to make 500,000 cars per year. So this plant serves as a benchmark for South Korea's investment in the United States and for making American manufacturing great again. Furthermore, it is expected to create a big job opportunities in the United States, both directly and indirectly. In particular, when the ROC US Summit was held last August, Jung Woo-sun, the chairman of Hyundai Motor Group, joined the event while preparing for his project to invest in the United States. More importantly, earlier in March, he made announcements in the White House for a $21 billion investment, and there the United States President said thank you to Hyundai Motor Group. In this sense, this raid would be a great disappointment to Hyundai Motor Group. All in all, the Hyundai manufacturing facility in the United States, including Georgia, matters not only symbolically but also substantially.
Right. Keeping in mind what Professor Ban has said then, Fabian, what has been Hyundai's response to this raid?
Yeah, they issued an official statement, and I think there are two important points that they made. The first is that, according to their understanding, none of those detained is actually directly employed by Hyundai Motor Company. That means the detained workers, they are either working for a partner or supplier or subcontractor of Hyundai. But Hyundai is saying that they are committed to the full compliance of the local laws and regulations, and this also includes the employment verification requirements and immigration laws, both for their direct workers and for workers of subcontractors and partners, etc. But of course, there's a big question. If you work with partners, subcontractors, is the responsibility also on the side of Hyundai to make sure that everyone they're working with together, that they also comply laws? But I mean, this is a little bit of an hypothetical question, because we don't know yet if the statement by ICE is actually true, because there's really conflicting information, and we know that some immigration attorneys said that, you know, their clients who were detained, they actually worked legally and not illegally.
Right. And in the meantime, Fabian, what has been the South Korean government's response?
I think there were like several steps of responses. Just when the news came out of this raid, the spokesperson of the foreign ministry immediately initiated a briefing, and the spokesperson said that, you know, we want to protect the rights of Korean companies investing in the US, but also Korean citizens. Their rights mustn't be unfairly violated. Then the foreign minister himself later also gave a statement, and he said that he feels deeply responsible for the situation. He wants to solve it, and if necessary, will fly to Washington. And actually, that's what's happening right now. He is going to the US to straighten things out, and at least according to the general consul from the embassy in Washington, said that most likely the detained workers can fly back home on Wednesday on a voluntary basis, so they will not be deported but decide to go back to South Korea.
Right. Professor Ban, does this latest development look to affect future investments into the US by South Korean businesses, do you think?
Well, without a doubt, this incident is pretty bad for future investment. But at the same time, it could serve as an opportunity to address an inherent problem in a more effective way than expected, because it is technically caused by incomplete visa policies. In more detail, this raid is obviously a shock to South Korean companies, which have been preparing for a huge investment, particularly in a situation where detailed investment plans are being made as a follow-up to the ROK-US summit. In this vein, this raid could make South Korean companies' investment unstable and intimidated. Moreover, this is bad for the ROK-US alliance, because South Korean companies' investment was significantly promoted as an opportunity for the ROK-US summit. Meanwhile, the ROK government has been negotiating with the United States government to bring detained Koreans back to South Korea as soon as possible. Along with these measures, more structural remedies to grapple with visa issues need to be made in order for this incident not to negatively affect future investment into the United States by South Korean companies. Seoul and Washington appear to be trying hard in an aim to deal with this incident, because how to deal with this incident is important for not only future economic cooperation, but also alliance cohesion.
Right, for sure. Fabian, in the meantime, though, some have made note of the unfortunate timing of this particular raid. Now, apparently on Thursday, while Hyundai was being raided, Mr. Trump on the same day signed an executive order lowering auto tariffs on Japanese cars to 15% from 27.5%. What are the concerns being shared, Fabian?
Yeah, so now basically Korean car producers, they feel disadvantaged. And I mean, this is correct, but right now all other foreign car makers are disadvantaged. They also face the 25% tariffs. But Japanese car producers, for example, Toyota, they have 10% less to pay in terms of tariffs. But that was kind of in response by Trump because the Japanese government promised to open their rice market and automobile market to the US, and they also promised another investment to the US. So maybe the US side is using this to say, look, soon we will also negotiate maybe lowering tariffs for the Korean car companies, but you have to give us additional promises. And I mean, this kind of strategy that the US is really very, in an assertive way, using its dominance, its power. Maybe on the short term it can work because it achieves some results. But in the long term, of course, it basically has negative consequences because it signals to Korean companies, but also to Korean politicians that the US side is not really reliable and is basically bullying. I mean, I have to say that in such strong words because the US is, what they're using is like Machiavelli, like that's power politics. And I think that's not how you deal with partners and not with allies, also not, yeah.
Right. Professor Ban, President Trump has reportedly defended the Hyundai raid. Does this look to affect diplomatic relations, do you suppose, between Seoul and Washington?
Obviously, the Hyundai raid is not a good sign for the future ROK-US relations, particularly in a situation where the ROK-US summit was held just 2 weeks ago, as I noted earlier. The ROK-US summit was evaluated to be successful back then. First, there was no Zelensky moment in the Oval Office. There was better chemistry between the two leaders than expected. Second, there were win-win outcomes. The typical win-win example is a MESGA, Make American Shipbuilding Great Again project. Furthermore, in addition to a $350 billion investment package related to tariff negotiations, South Korean companies promised an additional $150 billion investment to the United States. And in return, President Trump did not raise the issue of strategic flexibility related to readjustment of US forces in Korea. Meanwhile, the Hyundai raid tarnishes the productive ROK-US summit, particularly as you pointed out earlier, when Trump defended this raid while saying that there were illegal immigrants and ICE did its good job, actually. But at the same time, there is a sign that this issue could be addressed constructively. Trump does not want to make this incident worsen the ROK-US relationship. He mentioned that we have a great relationship with South Korea. He also hinted that the Trump administration will take a look at this incident in a more holistic way, including a visa issue and training program provided by foreign companies.
Against this backdrop, Fabian, we've been told by media in the US that Mr. Trump is planning a visit to South Korea next month. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, in South Korea, the APEC summit will be held in Gyeongju, the city that is known for ancient history here in South Korea. So APEC stands for Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit that will be held, I think, starting on the 31st of October. Now, President Donald Trump has a strong interest to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping, who is expected also to attend APEC summit. And of course, he would get a possibility to meet him there. There is also a very slight, but there could be a chance that Trump wants to visit Kim Jong-un, the North Korean ruler. So maybe after the APEC summit, if he would come to South Korea, he could head for the DMZ and meet him there. I mean, that is speculation, but I mean, those possibilities could arise. And I mean, South Korea is the host nation for this APEC summit. So that maybe gives President Lee Jae-myung some leverage because he is hosting the summit. He will also try to get his agenda through to the US president if he were to travel to South Korea. So there might be some possibility to renegotiate, and maybe Trump could restore some of the trust that was damaged during the recent Hyundai raid. Let's see how that goes.
Right, and staying with that then, Professor Ban, what is your assessment of the Trump administration's foreign policy based on your observations thus far, and how should the South Korean government seek to respond?
Well, to start with, while putting more emphasis on trade deals, Trump cares less about foreign policy. Instead, the Department of State and the Department of War put more emphasis on foreign and defense policies. So there are differences in policy priorities between Trump himself and his staff or cabinet members. With this insight in mind, first of all, South Korea needs to prepare for endless negotiations with Trump because the deal process is expected to continue under the second Trump administration. Second, South Korea should take advantage of the mascot project, which I noted earlier, as an asset to step up its leverage over the United States in this consecutive deal process by clarifying this project in more detail. In short, South Korea should encourage the mascot project to become a long-standing win-win mechanism. Finally, South Korea needs to proactively prepare for the rise of new deal-making venues related to security issues, such as strategic flexibility, SMA, a Special Measures Agreement, which is a burden-sharing issue, and finally, South Korea's future roles in the Indo-Pacific region. Since Trump pays tremendous attention to any type of deal, security issues will be on the table anytime soon as part of negotiation items. Meanwhile, as Fabian noted earlier, South Korea needs to take advantage of the upcoming diplomatic events in an effort to upgrade the ROK-US relationship. In particular, South Korea will serve as a chair and host country in the United Nations Security Council meeting and the APEC summit. So this will be a rare opportunity not only to upgrade South Korea's diplomatic role in the world, but also to enhance the bilateral relationship with the United States while cooperating with the United States on many issues.
Right. Keeping in mind what Professor Ban has said, Fabian, it's quite clear that the South Korean government has a very busy diplomatic agenda ahead of it. Do you suppose it will have the support, that is, of the public here? I mean, what has been the response from the public here in South Korea to the recent raid in the US?
Most South Koreans that I've talked to, they seem quite angry. But if you look at the response, I would say there are some differences. I mean, of course, there's a broad disappointment and also anger to some degree. But when I, for example, read conservative media, let's say the Chosun Ilbo, the big conservative newspaper, in one of their editorials, they wrote that, you know, it's very inconsistent by the Trump administration that on the one side they demand our companies to invest and build factories, but at the same time there are not enough qualified workers in the US. So basically, Korean companies, they have to you know, get in workers sometimes on short-term visa waivers, which is kind of a gray zone from my understanding. But basically, conservative media, they are disappointed, but they are a little bit more understanding maybe towards the US side and don't want to question the whole alliance with the US. While the leftist media, for example, Hangul, which is on the left side, they basically write in their editorial, Koreans feel like they've been slapped in the back, and that's quite a strong wording here. And I'm sure that within the left there could be also a debate if the US is not as reliable as it used to be before. Should we maybe move closer towards China? I mean, this could basically be a debate, and that should be concerning for Washington because previous US governments have worked very hard to get Korea on board and basically foster the alliance that is always quote-unquote ironclad. That's a phrase that has been shared widely, but what Trump has been doing recently speaks another language.
Right. Do you suppose the APEC summit here in the country will provide Trump perhaps with an opportunity to gain support back from his allies?
Actually, that could very well be. I mean, Trump has been very inconsistent in his public performances. Sometimes he says this, and the next day he says something else. I mean, the summit itself with President Lee Jae-myung was quite successful. Then, you know, there was a sudden change of dynamics again. So, of course, Trump could restore trust back. But, I mean, at some point, some things are irreversible. Some things, I mean, you cannot just destroy the trust 10 times, 12 times, and then, you know, expect that things go back to normal again. So I think there are long-lasting negative effects that cannot easily be repaired.
Right. Well, for the time being, though, I'm sure South Korea is hoping for the safe return of its workers from the US. All right, Fabian, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Professor Ban, thank you very much for your insights.
Thanks for having me.
Right, well, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching.